speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. There is very, very big news coming from the United States of America. As we all know, the American president, Donald Trump, he signed an executive order that, in a way, suspends the enforcement of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. The FCPAs, as you all know, in a sense, involves prosecution under law if somebody pays bribes to secure business abroad. But we are not the experts. We have the expert with us, senior advocate and Rajya Sabha MP, Mr. Mahesh Jetnali, joins us. He will share what has this to do with the impact on the case on Gautam Adani and Sagar Adani. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to some interesting insight on why this development in your view and what impact does it have?
Well, there have been a series of steps that have been taken. First, of course, sometime back, a US Senator called Lance Gooden, he first made a statement that the Department of Justice, and particularly the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, who initiated this indictment, was acting by extraneous influences. And he actually said that it should be investigated and seen whether George Soros was behind Merrick Garland's actions. He actually made that connection and said it needs to be investigated. Then, of course, came Donald Trump's, the president's, executive order by which he said that FCPA, as you just pointed out, the FCPA investigations should not be selectively used. They should be rarely used, right? And in this case, where there is no lost cause, right? And there's only speculation about bribery which took place in India, then you should let the jurisdiction where the alleged bribery took place decide the matter. You can't, in any case, you don't have the wherewithal, the means to do this kind of an investigation. So clearly this seems to be a targeted against one company action. Right? And then you had 6 senators 3-4 hours ago who announced that, this seems to be against the US strategic interests, because India is a very strategic ally in America's checking China's actions, particularly in the South China Sea. And India is a member of Quad. We're in an alliance together. It said that it is incongruous that when you treat an ally in this terrible fashion, and there's no impact caused. What is the gain? Somebody must tell us, right? What is the gain in initiating these proceedings by Merrick Garland? It seems to a Biden administration targeted attack, and it merits investigation whether the biggest donor to the Biden administration and the Democratic deep state, i.e. George Soros, was behind it, as he has been behind so many other anti-Indian actions, including creating destabilization of Bangladesh in our neighborhood.
Does it mean that all is going to be good between Adani's and because they have business interests in America? We're seeing some, in fact, after Trump, the news of Trump's presidency spread, he also made an announcement. So, of course, bilateral relations are strengthened when Indian capital also goes to America. Any impact do you see that this problem gets to be resolved soon, or do you think there's still some time before the issue will?
Well, the flooding of activity, which I just referred to and which you also spoke about, right, indicates quite clearly that there is something in the offing, right? This is, I've been saying it from a long time, Tarun, that this is a completely motivated and baseless indictment. There is no, it is supposed to be a conspiracy or a preparation for doing bribery. Not even a conspiracy. A conspiracy is a fructified agreement. This is like toying with the idea. That's the case. You're toying with the idea to get power contracts in solar contracts in particular in India, right? With no evidence. The indictment discloses no evidence, right? So both in terms of evidence and B in terms of impact, and C, strategic allies being treated like this, the whole episode was a complete disaster.
Thank you for your insight into this whole issue. As always, you've been coming and clearing doubts on the Adani case in New York, and thanks to you that people get to know the latest. Of course, it involves a conglomerate which sort of is important strategically to India, given the kind of acquisitions it has done, be it in Israel, which is the Haifa port and all. So it is not just a business. There is a geopolitical angle also to it. That's why we discuss. Appreciate your joining us, and looking forward to request your time again whenever another news on this issue arises. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Tarun. Thank you.
So that was Senior Advocate Mahesh Jethmalani, also Rajya Sabha MP. He has studied this issue in depth and also, in a sense, put his weight behind the issue, where he said that a target of a certain businessman should not happen. And obviously, this news about the FCPA suspension is good news. Now we'll go to our next set of panelists to take their inputs and assessment of the situation. Now we are joined by one of country's top lawyers, Senior Advocate Amit Desai, who joins us from the city of Mumbai. Thank you for your time, and looking forward to your input on this particular question, which is, does this suspension of FCPA, which is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the enforcement of this law, bring good news for Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani, and the Adani Group? Also, that we hear that 6 congressmen in America have written to the Attorney General about this case, and obviously in support of Adani. So, could you throw light on both these instances and how this sort of means good news for the Adani Group, and any other analysis that you would like to share, how you see this situation emerging? This all happened a day before the Prime Minister Narendra Modi is to land in America. He was in France. Over to you for this.
So, thank you, Tarun, as always, for inviting me on this show. The decision of the US president, which I've read in the media, which you just sent me, actually goes beyond politics. And that's why I really want to segregate this, because I don't think it's about the fact that Mr. Modi is visiting the US and therefore this has happened. I don't think there's no connection between the two prima facie. I don't think so. But let me give you a slightly different perspective as I see in relation to the FCPA legislation per se and what has happened. I know that in the past, for many, many decades, FCPA investigations have happened across the world, and obviously in relation to transactions that have taken place in India, and Indian law firms have been involved in doing a lot of FCPA investigations on behalf of their American clients and their Indian subsidiaries in the past. In the question, which is a more larger question which I think the US government seems to be looking into and taking up, and there is a point in that, is that whilst you definitely want to stop corruption across the world, the problem that arises is that they have their own interpretations, their own approach to the problem. They have their own laws in relation to it, and it impacts companies and countries across the globe. And this is not the first time that we've seen allegations of FCPA, but in the past, we have also seen that when there have been these allegations made in the US, the Indian authorities have actually looked into some of them because they feel the need to look into it and close those inquiries, saying that according to us in India, no case is made out. Now, the challenge that we face, and particularly I think the Adani case puts this really the issue into focus, is that you have a US authority looking into a US legislation. Their rules, interpretations may be different from the interpretations of the Indian laws. You're dealing with, persons who are not within the scope of their jurisdiction. You have not conducted any investigation in relation to these matters in the territory within which these events are supposed to have happened. You have not spoken to the people who are supposed to be impacted. And you come to your prima facie view, qua an American corporation say that you have violated FCP, and then you rope in a lot of the other people whom you have not contacted, you have not investigated. Now, typically in an investigation, you would never launch a criminal investigation of this type unless you have actually done the full, complete and thorough investigation into a matter. The reason being that anywhere in where the rule of law prevails, the principle in criminal law is the burden is on the prosecution to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. Now, the responsibility of the prosecution is so high. In the course of their investigation, they are duty bound to investigate all aspects of the matter from a 360-degree perspective and then launch a proceeding. We see that in India all the time. Now, what seems to have happened, unfortunately, in this matter is none of that was done. And suddenly you find a proceeding that is being initiated without any real investigations in India. We don't know the truth of any of these allegations. In fact, there's been a lot of conversation in the past. I don't want to go into it. If you looked at that document, which is up in the public domain a few months ago, there are serious lapses and lacunas in that document itself. Now, by any principle of criminal law and criminal jurisprudence, I don't think that there was sufficient justification to launch the prosecution. Now, if what you read, and what I read in the report where the president has now decided to put FCPA on hold, is because what they are seeing is across the globe, Americans are taking action in relation to commercial transactions that are taking place across the globe, and the current dispensation feels that that is now impacting US business. That is impacting US business. Now, this president wants to promote the US economy and US corporations. So he has seen it from that perspective and said that what is happening overall is, I don't know whether what is happening in those countries is right or wrong. We don't have the investigative mechanism to go there and investigate those things. But what is it doing to the American corporations? It's actually depriving them of the benefit of businesses. So when you look at it from their perspective, he's doing it because he thinks that it has impacted the economy of the United States. But from our perspective, when we look at it here in India, these matters have caused unnecessarily huge reputational damage without any proper inquiry and investigation to the matter. Now, this is where I think there was a need that before you start taking action, because it's like the long arm jurisdiction of the US. I understand the principles of extraterritoriality in criminal matters. We've dealt with it. There's a need at some level in certain types of offenses to have, cross-border cooperation. But you can't have unilateral inquiries, unilateral action, and then, raise issues so far as people who are, not within your jurisdiction. And it's not uncommon, across the planet that law, be it civil or criminal, gets used even for political purposes. One has seen it. So we should be careful that these laws can never be used for political purpose and political outcomes. But more so in today's world, when we see the kind of politics that's happening across the world, the geopolitical situations, then you have to be very much more cautious. Law enforcement agencies have to be very much more careful and cautious in not being allowed to be used for extraneous considerations. So when I sort of saw this matter and I saw what you just sent me, I think it's a good thing that it's been put on hold. If ever they had to really go into this aspect of the matter, it's their duty to do a full and a complete investigation before they can actually make allegations of such serious nature against people who are outside of their jurisdiction. So I think this is a positive, and I think it is good that this is happening at this point of time. I would like to keep what your opening comment, because I think it's just happened because the president has come in and he has taken one by one issues to protect the US corporation, the US economy. And I think Mr. Adani might be the beneficiary of some actions that have been taken to protect the American companies and the American economy. So I don't want to make this a political conversation, because I think it's on principle and on law and on how they look at the way they want to run their country that this has happened. So I think these are my sort of preliminary thoughts, Tarun, on this.
Thank you. And they were quite detailed and made us understand the issue. I will go to Senior Advocate Percival Belliboria for his opening comment.
So I agree with what Amit Bhai said. I think it may be just a coincidence. And, it may also be that, because of Mr. Modi's visit, the issue came to the top of his mind. And he said, okay, let me look at this angle. But I can certainly tell you that this issue of American competitiveness has long been many congressmen have been exercised over this for a long period of time. There was a firm in Washington, D.C., which was planning to present a paper to Congress to say that, look, when we are faced with foreign contracts and some of the other nations, so for example, in particular, I remember they named Iraqi companies and Russian company, they have no qualms about, just running wild in a foreign jurisdiction. And then, American companies are bound to the rules. And therefore, there is an element of anti-competitiveness that was really the something that was out there. And it may have only just come to the fore, but that doesn't mean that it didn't exist. We must also note that, look, as far as FCPA is concerned, FCPA does contain a provision where, if you're an issuer of a bond or any security, and, if you may be a company anywhere in the world, and if you are issuing a bond to American investors in the American market, then you are obliged to, to come under the FCPA umbrella. And I think that's probably the reason why this issue kicked off in the first place. And as Amit Bhai rightly pointed out, in addition to what he said, I must point out that it's a grand jury investigation. And I don't know American law, but I know enough American lawyers to tell you that grand jury indictments are looked at with some degree of healthy skepticism.
Point very well taken. I'll go to senior advocate Sanjay Jain. Sir, you served as ASG for 10 long years in this government, which is the Narendra Modi government. You know how prosecution works because you served on that side. Of course, now you're back to private practice. Could you tell me and get a sense of this being good news for Adani that FCPA enforcement has been suspended by an executive order signed by President Trump?
Tarun, in my view, Adani's were collateral damage on account of this law. And now with the law being suspended, Adani's are collateral beneficiaries. It has nothing to do with the head of a state visiting another head of a state. It may be coincidental, but there are larger issues because one may not be adopting an approach of looking at a forest for the woods. For the detailing, etc., one may not lose the focus on the core issue. The core issue is this, that the way this law is sought to be implemented in United States is highly questionable from India's point of view because if they want to implement a US law against an Indian company or an Indian citizen, then that particular law must comply with the basic norms of rule of law which is followed in India. And that rule of law is that you please verify the facts and give us an opportunity of responding to it. So on the basis of an unverified fact, on third-party sources, which are totally unpredictable and unknown, you propose to initiate a prosecution against a foreign national or a foreign company who is a non-American is highly questionable. And that too, when the core of your allegation is not that the so-called bribes have been paid in United States. One can understand that is a different situation. The core of the allegation is that so-called bribes were paid in India. So this completely takes away the basic premise on which the law is structured. So to the extent I understand, this Foreign Corrupt Practices Act ought not to have been pressed into service against an Indian company or an Indian individual, and that too when nothing sort of principles of natural justice being complied with. You are putting somebody in double jeopardy because you are initiating a process on the basis of an alleged delinquency committed in India, for which you are exposing somebody to be prosecuted in India as well as in US. So it is a classic case of double jeopardy. So whichever way you look at it, the way the law was being enforced and implemented was highly questionable and undesirable. And I'm glad that the light of wisdom has dawned upon the American administration and they have put the law in abeyance. And it will be quite good in American interest as well as in the interest of other genuine countries and genuine business entities who want to do trade and commerce at the international level, that no business entity or business person should be harassed by such kind of laws. So it is a good thing which has happened not only for Adanis, but also for other Indian business individuals and entities.
Okay. But one thing that, we'll take a quick comment from you on six congressmen write to the new Attorney General, against Adani's indictment. Do you see that this would, in a sense, bode good news? Because these six congressmen, while writing to the Attorney General, have said the charges are questionable.
You see, the congressmen in United States are usually very well informed, at least on the legal issues which have an international impact. And if as many as six congressmen have addressed their concern to the Attorney General, then it has a serious dimension. It has to be taken with utmost gravity and seriousness, that such thing or such a practice is being recklessly followed, that merely because you are somebody is a superpower, so they would one fine morning issue a flyer saying that such and such Indian company or such and such foreign company or an individual is being investigated or prosecuted for this alleged crime, for which he till that morning he's not even aware of. So therefore this brings an unpredictability.
Point well taken. I'll take this to Senior Advocate Amit Desai. The words used by the six congressmen are questionable decisions made by the US Department of Justice, again, like the indictment of the Adani Group in the alleged bribery scam, jeopardizes relationship with close ally India. So, in a sense, they are using strong words here that this will go to the extent of jeopardizing relations with India. It is not simply some case launched against some businessman. You're not audible.
Yeah. Sorry. No, certainly, when I mentioned in the opening that there's really no investigation that was done in relation to the aspect of the alleged crime so far as India is concerned, that is where this issue, as I read it, of questionable decision. The questionable decision is that without a full, fair and complete impartial investigation to the matter, you decide to launch the prosecution in a court. It was your first and primary duty as an agency which is investigating such an alleged crime to investigate it completely and thoroughly in all aspects of the matter. You have failed to do that. Therefore, this investigation was not impartial in that sense. It was not a fair investigation in that sense. So when the congressmen are saying questionable decision, I would possibly read into it that they are questioning the very basis of launching the prosecution and filing the indictment because there was no complete, proper, fair investigation. So that's why it's a questionable decision. You then go to the second aspect of the matter about the question of friendly relations with the country. Now, when you start taking on prominent business leaders, it's not just about Mr. Adani. It could be any other prominent business leader who are significant contributors to the economy of a country, and you then start making these kind of serious allegations of this nature, then at some level, it is going to have an impact on a G2G basis. Of course, Mr. Adani has so many different, he's a conglomerate, he runs so many businesses, they've got so much of revenue that they contribute to the Indian government, they contribute, they have international transactions of a very significant nature. So all this, if you're going to impact, because by making a serious allegation like this, everybody understands that it starts impacting the ability to raise funds in the market, international market. So you're impacting the business. Now that is something which you're then hurting the Indian economy through that means. So you have to be careful and cautious about how to kind of make these allegations. Therefore, the G2G issue also does come in.
Point well taken. I'll take this quickly for the completing the comment. Mr. Sanjay Dey and Mr. Bilimoria can come in thereafter. Mr. Jay.
Yes, and in my view, what is to be seen is that if this prosecution were to go on, then the Security Exchange Commission of US, along with the Department of Justice, would have proceeded with this prosecution. Now, such kind of a serious prosecution against a foreign entity based on unverified facts has a greater implication in a business ecosystem, because any business ecosystem basically functions on predictable laws and predictable regime. Now, these kinds of prosecution are absolutely unpredictable. So this unpredictable element is something which is going to cause damage to the business interest of USA, as also the business interest of other countries who are allies of USA and with whom USA has business relationship. So therefore, it is a very welcome move on the part of the US administration to put this law in abeyance. And as I said, that it is a coincidence that Adanis are beneficiary of this particular action. But then this action having been taken at the behest of the highest functionary of the administration and also being supported by US congressmen is a highly welcome move, because it will help in generating will.
Point well taken. I'll go to Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria. Two things here: six congressmen writing a letter, and the Trump pausing the enforcement of FCPA. Do you think things will normalize soon, or still some time off, or this is good news and look forward to more?
We'll have to see what happens, but certainly, the diktat from Trump has, in a lot of ways, put Mr. Adani on the front foot, because quite apart from the fact that, double jeopardy as argued by Mr. Jain, and also the fact that if there is any violation of law, it's really an Indian issue. The point really is that what the six congressmen said, and this is because there's a new word, Tarun, called lawfare. This new word has crept into the vocabulary of geopolitics. So geopolitics and, it is a lot more than just, traditional war as we know it. And there's another interesting thing about FCPA, which I'll tell you, which is that it's a Carter-era law. And it was in cold storage for many decades. It was only after 9/11 that the Bush administration dusted it out. And the reason they did that is they realized that, look, when you have terrorism, then, corruption and those kind of sources tend to fund terrorism. So it was meant for a particular purpose. It was never really meant to go after US companies or even foreign companies, because of the extraterritorial jurisdiction, who are accused of some crime somewhere in a remote location without even going into the depth of the matter.
So point well taken. I'll go to Senior Advocate Amit Desai for one last comment before ending.
So I think now that we have seen this action, obviously, in the context of the indictment that has been filed against Mr. Adani and his nephew and the other Indians, I think, of course, it will take some time, because ultimately that proceeding has been initiated in the court of law. And this is an administrative and an executive act to put a legislation in hold. I think the question that will arise as a matter of law is that by putting the legislation hold, is it permissible by an executive act, because it was an act passed by Parliament? But the more important thing is, what does the DOJ do? And therefore, the DOJ will now have to take a decision on this larger policy decision of the government, of the present dispensation, and whether they would then take the necessary steps of withdrawing what I would like to call we call it in Indian terms, a lame proceeding, because we've all sort of seen the document. I think we all as lawyers understand what that document really means. But the real thing is that, very often a lame prosecution needs to be withdrawn, and it should not be carried to its logical end, because these are matters which have larger political, geopolitical, and larger interest at stake. So I think it's for the DOJ now to be responsible and take the appropriate decision, and then re-examine by first withdrawing this proceeding. They are free to re-look at the matter afresh, but don't rush into court, which is what happens in some of the investigations even in this country, are commented upon by our Supreme Court often. So I hope that we will at least see the withdrawal of these proceedings which have been filed in the criminal courts.
Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on this important issue. After Prime Minister returns, what happens here? We'll also try to speak to our sources in the government to find out more on this. Of course, there'll be some movement since the Prime Minister is in America. What is it? We'll come to know in the next 2 days. Maybe we'll have to request you again to join in, and hopefully you all will oblige. But I would like to thank Senior Advocate Amit Desai, Senior Advocate Sanjay Jain, Senior Advocate Percival Bilimoria. Thank you for making time, throwing light on this issue, which is not a simple issue of a businessman being prosecuted. It has got geopolitical ramification because, of course, conglomerates like Adani do strategic acquisitions. Case in point, the Haifa port in Israel. So these are also issues where, a lot of geopolitics gets involved, and that's why we discuss this. Appreciate you joining us. Thank you so very much.